Greetings, everyone, and welcome to episode 11 of Lines on a Page. I am your host, Thomas Price, your poor man's Bob Ross. So today we're going to be talking about drawing the four elements. That's basically fire, water, earth, and air. And these are basically things that are usually used a lot in a lot of comics and a lot of animation, game design, so on and so forth. You see it everywhere. And especially with its most famous use being in the Fantastic Four, as far as comics are concerned, all the way to more modern with Avatar: The Last Airbender. But before I get into that, I'm going to do some quick housekeeping, real quick. If you happen to like the show or anything else that Haven Comics happens to do, please remember to like and subscribe. And if you're wanting to know where you can find me on social media, you can like and follow me through linktree.com/tpriceartworks, and you will find me everywhere. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, if it still exists. Also have a Patreon, and also buy me a coffee on Venmo as a tip if you feel so inclined, because you won't find a blood type in my veins. It's actually coffee, which is really sad. I am going to put in the comments exactly the materials I'm going to be using today, because we are going to be going digital yet again. I figured this would be an easier thing for me to do, just given the time that I've got to work with, and it's definitely several different things that I like to work around and use and make things easier, just for me to basically say everything that I need to. So I think the two elements that I believe are going to be, let me change this up just a little bit. The two elements that I feel like are going to be the ones that are going to be, I would say, the hardest to draw is going to be fire, and it's also going to burn. The reason is that fire, I think for the longest time, people have kind of taught how to draw it wrong, just a little bit. And with air, there's so many different ways you can go about with drawing air. But again, all the things I'm going to be talking about here are the ways that I found to work around in order to draw these four elements and use them in comics, whether it's like special powers or you want to learn how to draw, a waterfall, or, a heavy breeze or something like that. You can use all these things to basically kind of give you ideas to fit in your back pocket so you understand how to draw these things. And it looks like we have someone, Tots, coming in with the clutch, getting diggy with it. Thank you for joining, Tots. All right, so let's do fire first, just to get that out of the way. So I know a lot of people have drawn fire, and they've probably taught you how to do this sort of thing. Which, is right to a degree, but the problem that I learned from the 90s, or it looks like a bunch of crustaceans hailing their crustacean overlord. Because that's what it looks like, we're being perfectly honest. And it's really not what I want to teach you guys on how to do it. So the thing about drawing fire is that it's going to have a couple different things that we need to think of whenever we are drawing it. Sometimes we're going to have to deal with the possibility of a light source. And we're also going to have the possibility of whether or not if it's just the flame itself, or if there's going to be smoke at the end of the fire burning. So since we have, those things that we need to think about sometimes whenever we're doing fire, if it's someone that's creating fire in broad daylight, you really won't have to think about light source unless you're doing colors. But if it's at night, then that is something that, or uh, like Indiana Jones going through a tomb and he has a torch, those things would make sense. So with fire, I like to do something that kind of gets to the idea that we've got burning. Let's say campfire. Uh, get an idea of what's going on. And so we have what looks like the beginnings of a small campfire, and see pieces of the kindling or sticks at the bottom of this little campfire, and kind of idea of what we've on. But then, what if we wanted to put, the possibility of like smoke billowing out from the fire? Well, instead of having these little sections of, little wisp of flames coming up from the main flame itself, we can actually erase some of this, and oops, we can start thinking about let me increase the size of this. So now we've got some more, billowings of smoke kind of coming in. Now, if you're noticing, Rick, that whenever I'm doing that, I'm doing basically a side to side kind of motion to get the idea of, smoke basically just kind of pluming itself up and increasing. In which case, if there is going to be like a really big fire going on, like a giant bonfire, then we're also probably going to have to think about what we've got going on here. So instead of just, small amount of sticks, probably something a little bit more akin to like, a funeral pyre, if you want to call it that. Now, keep in mind, whenever you're thinking about, you know, funeral pyres or giant bonfires and stuff like that, there's a point when we're getting into all this where if you're looking at, let me change the color just a little bit. This section right here is basically going to be a section where it's going to start off dark and it's going to get progressively lighter. So it kind of gives off the illusion that there is fire going on. And then, of course, that's when you start building in the billowings of the smoke as it's getting higher and higher. And another way around it is if we're thinking about it in terms of like complete darkness, what you could do is this little number. So now that we're thinking about it, in complete darkness, or it's, raging bonfire at night, basically. But then, what if we start thinking about uh, fireball or something like that? Well, instead of just doing all of that, what we can do is get my pencil ready. First things first, obviously, you're going to be thinking about, like, shooting direction and all that sort of stuff. So, we're thinking about our basic shapes, and it's a fireball. Obviously, we're going to think about circle first or sphere. And, if it's like a stationary fireball in the palm of the hands, then, we're going to have this kind of number going on. And then we start erasing these parts. And, let's say we're going to change things up a little bit more. Let's say the person's actually holding kind of like a hot, stone of some sort that's creating fire around it. Then, like the campfire, we would give it some depth. And then, of course, if you wanted to, shoot it left, right, forward, we would think about the perspective that it's going to be in. And of course, if it's going right, then that means that the trails are going to have to go left. If it's shooting left, then the trails have to go right. So yeah, I mean, so those are basically the main ways that I think about fire. I'm thinking about, uh, things that are burning inside of it are more likely going to be black. They're going to be charred. Uh, good space with whites or whatever color that you're using for the fire. If it's like a normal flame, that you would obviously think about, your yellows, your burnt oranges, maybe a little bit of red. If it's like a ghostly flame, then blues and greens would be perfect to make it spooky. So, several different things we can think about as far as that's concerned. And it does kind of put it into the perspective of a character like, say, Ghost Rider, for instance, with the Flaming Skull. I've never been a big fan of why they would make the skull completely white with, all the flames that are going around it. It made more sense for the skull to be charred. And that was the one thing that, even though it was a terrible sequel for the two Ghost Rider movies. But the one thing that they did right was the fact that the skull was charred. I'll give them a point for that. So now that we've got fire out of the way, let's look at water. Now, water is something that's going to be, all puns included, a very fluid thing for you to try to come up with. So, if we're thinking about, say, let's use a fire hydrant, for instance. So we've got like a fire hydrant that is, it's been popped open. Then obviously we've got water coming out, obviously vertical, but there's also parts of it that is kind of shooting off out on the sides around and near the base. So it is one way of looking at it, but let's say that we wanted it to be directional. So if we wanted it to say go this way, then we are going to, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. So something I've noticed about, using a hose to water plants and flowers in my mom's garden or gardens, I should say. I've noticed whenever I'm looking at a stream, regardless of how powerful the stream is or not, sometimes there's usually like, breaks near the very top of the stream, sometimes near the middle, depending on just how much water pressure is going for. So sometimes whenever I'm drawing water, I like to have like a small little break at the top. And then I will go in and create a bit of a direction. And, you know, like all water, more likely I'll be doing little circles here and there to give the idea of water droplets just, going up, down, left, right. It's just going everywhere. And then we could think about it in terms of like, let's say wave is about to kind of come crashing. And let's say we've got some sort of wall block. And we've got a wave that's going to come up and crash against this. So in this case, the wave is, so if the wall is trying to get to the correct part of wherever the view is. So if this is the wall right here, that means that anything that's going to be, doing it this way, anything that's going to be coming against it is going to be heading this way. It's going to go up just a bit, and then whatever that might cascade over this way or up towards that way is going to be very few and far in between. So, and I know that this is all like kind of common sense sort of stuff, but you would be surprised how much this just does not leach into people's minds sometimes. So we're going to kind of create like a bit of it's not the meniscus, it's whatever the foam or some sort of whatever that top layer is that you would see with ocean waves crashing and stuff like that. Um, the surf, I really don't know the exact term for it, but that is what this part is going to be. And then I'm not sure if you've ever noticed this, but sometimes, like with what I did up here, with creating these, directional lines that are kind of dark to give the idea that there's more to the volume of the water going. We're going to do the same thing right here. And we're going to to yet again, it's giving off, direction of, the wave crashing in. And gives off an interesting effect. Now you can do it, within like a hatching type, thing that I'm doing right now, or you could do it another, which is basically just blocking it out. So if this was the same thing, you would basically just block the entire thing out. But at the same time, I think you would spend more time doing that than you would if you were hatched out uh, personally. And then, of course, you've got other with, water as well. We can also think about, well, what about ice? I'll get to that in a second. Quick water break. Now, ice can be done basically just going to erase all this out instead of creating a whole new layer. So with ice, we can basically kind of do the same thing with water. It's going to be direction. There's going to be uh, almost the same kind of techniques, but it's more rigid, and sometimes even some. If you really want to get into detail, like laying out snowflakes and all that sort of stuff. Um, So, for instance, some of the things I'm going to be drawing here with ice is going to be almost kind of rooted over when we start talking about Earth. So, let's use this as a ice crystal of sorts. Uh, Zoom in just a little bit. So, drawing ice crystals would be no different if we're drawing like geodes. There's, I know it's a really fun looking geode, but the same principles apply because sometimes, we'll look at it here and then it's got, interesting striations and weird sections like this. And then, of course, not all geodes are going to look like, a weird obelisk. They're going to have coming out of it. Same kind of situation. But I think with just, with ice crystals, I'll always think about them as, these really just weird, strict geometric shapes that look like they could just kill you in an instant if one of them just got thrown your way. Um, so, what about a larger crystal, for instance? But it's got multiple things going on with it. Well, can do something like this. Then we would just start blocking in these shadows to kind of give it some depth. So we would have a much larger, ice crystal right here. And of course, excuse me, uh, you would always think about, the line weight. When trying to do this. And for those of you who just happen to be new and watching this and you have no idea what I mean by line weight is basically just understanding the differences between what happens to be not just the focus of where your eyes are at, but also understanding the differences of different objects or persons within a space that you're looking at, whether it's just a static looking thing or if it's within perspective. In this case, for instance, if my hand is completely right in front of you, then obviously the light of my hand would be a lot thicker than the line weight that would be where my face is at, to give you the understanding of what the object is. So now that we've got that part out of the way, then I guess the question would be, well, what about snow? Well, the easiest thing to do with snow is to leave an entire page completely blank and white. That is definitely the easy way around it. Or you can definitely do this. And this kind of goes with not just with water and rain, but it also work with snow as well. And the best way for me to do this is to do this number. And it's the easiest way for me to show this. So if we're dealing with rain, water, especially if we're dealing with like say we're in a heavy thunder, then it just makes that let's say we've got an object right here. First things first, we are going to be all right, let's say we've got a person in a trench coat. It's a dark and stormy night. And it's raining. So, rain, it could be just straight deluge downpour straight down. In which case, it would just be, a lot of lines going down. Or we can make it interesting. And you know what? I'm going to increase the size of this person real quick. Make it easier. Okay. So, what I like to do whenever we're dealing with, raindrops and stuff like that falling on a person, I like to do a little effect here and there. And let me use this real quick. Basically, kind of giving off the idea that rain is, hitting the person from a very specific direction. Almost no different if we were talking about almost like a light source, but not really. But we're going to call it a rain source. Perfect example in terms of the I would say a person who's an absolute beast of doing this sort of thing. Um, it's definitely going to be Frank Miller. If you ever get a chance to read Sin City uh, in all of its noir, you'll definitely see that going on. And it looks like we got someone in the chat. David says, rain has always been hard to do. It can definitely be tricky, um, which is why we're talking about this right now. So now that we've established that, rain's going to be coming in this way, or I guess it's hitting the left shoulder or side of this person, then that means that the lines are more 75% are going to be coming in from that direction. So and then we would also make sure there are lines coming in from the front and behind, and also on the side of the character as well. And of course, I'm totally just giving you an idea. And like I said, by it being 75%, rain just kind of does its own thing. And just to give you an idea of how that would look. Now, now that we've established that that can exist, well, then what about snow? Well, if we did the same thing, and let's say we've got, character yet again walking through snow. But this time, we're actually going to be putting down a bit of a snowy field. Because I feel like this is going to be the best way for me to really give off the idea of it. If you want a comic that does, excuse me, yet again, snow, but they basically did snow to the nth degree, I would highly recommend finding a mystery suspense comic called Whiteout. There was a 2000s movie with Kate Beckinsale that was an adaptation of the same comic, but it's basically a murder mystery in the Antarctic. That would be my recommendation. All right, so let's say we've got, sorry. Person yet again, their snowsuit, trying to walk through the snow. going to fix these little plots right here real quick. All right, so just to give you an idea of snow being right there, and of course, person's face is right here and all that fun stuff. So because of digital technology, we can basically kind of emulate snow with using an airbrush. Or if you're doing it traditional, there are 1 or 2 different ways you could do it. You can stipple with white ink, or you can do what I do, which is basically flaking and creating a bit of an atmospheric effect and random, controlled random, I should say, pattern of snow. So, uh, you know, so stipple pattern, or if we're doing something a bit larger, it would be basically like this. And, depending on air movement and stuff like that, you might have a bit of a fog going on. Or I should say, uh, it's not really a fog, but definitely more so of a snow sort of thing going, snowstorm. My mind is completely just running out of trying to figure out how to talk about barometric stuff. So, that would be an idea of trying to use snow with that. All right, so let's move on to Earth. Like what we were talking about earlier with ice crystals and things of that nature. See what I did there? Earth pun. All right. So with Earth, there's a couple different we can do with that. We can, talk about drawing vegetation, growing. So, random vines. They can be thorny, or they can be very leafy. While they're coming out of the ground, or they could be leafy and thorny if they wanted to be, or it can definitely be a bit more plant-like with a little bit of a carnivorous sort of thing. All right. So, you can definitely do, random vegetation just sprouting up, very poison ivy, swamp thing ish, if you want to do that sort of thing. Or what we can do is think about pieces of ground and earth being ripped up, kind of like earthquake-ish, sort of thing. So let's say that we wanted to like have a character like what's her name from Teen Titans, Terra, and she's able to basically control, the earth around her and stuff like that. So let's say this is, a piece of turf that she just happened to have ripped up. And then we're going to okay, have this going on. So if this is to start with, the turf or grass, then this bottom part is basically going to be soil. And we would go in underneath it to create some depth. And then because it's being, ripped up from the ground, then that means that we're going to have bits and pieces of debris, basically just kind of let's throw in some random root. All right. So something that I've noticed a lot with, I would say, at least in American comics, you really didn't see a lot of what looks like debris or pieces of earth, pieces of earth and ground and rock, rubble, and all that stuff, sort of flying everywhere and all that sort of stuff until we start getting into like the late 90s, the late 80s, early 90s. Because you started to see a stylistic change, artists, especially with Marvel, because this is where we start getting into guys like Mark Silvestri, Jim Lee, Tom McFarlane, so on and so forth, who would later become the OG image artists, which then branched off into Wildstorm, Top Cow. Uh, Forgot the name of the other company that was also a part of it. But that's where these guys were basically notorious for using pieces of just random debris and rubble and stuff like that, just kind of flying off in the wind after characters would do superhero landings and Magneto was powering up, and then you would see like pieces of debris and rubble and stuff like that floating up around him, with like a power effect or something like that. So you would see a lot, at least in American comics at that time period. Um, I would argue to say that stuff like that actually happened way before those guys did on the opposite side of the world in manga. And you would see that a lot, especially in the 80s, especially with a lot of sci-fi, a lot of fantasy stuff that was happening back then. Perfect example would be Akira. Um, and then, my, the entire Dragon Ball going Dragon Ball Z, you would see that in a lot of the panels, a lot of the fight scenes and stuff like that. You would just see random debris and rubble, just kind of flying around and doing stuff. And and give you a perfect example. Let's say we have I don't know. Let's say something had just like crashed into the ground, or yeah. So we would have. Actually, you know what? We're going to do something kind of similar to Avatar, Last Airbender, or at least with the Earthbenders. You would have a character that would basically just kind of do something with the ground, and then they would create this effect of Earth basically just kind of uprooting itself. And then you would just have like, bits of rubble and debris just, flying everywhere. Another great example of something similar to this would be Full Metal Alchemist. If you guys ever get around to reading it or watching it, I would highly recommend Brotherhood versus the original one. Nothing against the original one. It just didn't feel as concise. But yeah, I mean, you would see just like, bits and pieces of rubble and stuff like that just kind of flying around. And it didn't matter, up, down, left, right. When stuff like this, when we're dealing with like rubble everywhere and debris, it just doesn't really matter anymore. And like the ice crystals that I was drawing earlier, you would just have just really interesting geometric shapes like this, and then even more circular ones. That almost looks like a cinnamon roll right there. All right. So that basically kind of gives you a really quick idea as to, how to draw Earth. And then the last one is going to be, whoa, didn't mean to do that. And I'm not sure where it went. Interesting. Okay. That was weird. All right. Air. Uh, we could definitely draw one of many different ways if we wanted to. Uh, and that's always, and this is going to be the hardest one because you're really going to be asking the question: am I drawing air being pushed or drawing smoke or gas? So if we're drawing air pushed, then it's really, let me write this down. Okay, so that's the question that we're going to be asking ourselves. If we're drawing air being pushed, this is where we get into two different scenarios. We're either going to be thinking about objects being pushed, because we're going to get into that whole Martin Luther King uh, thing where he's talking about, you know, can you see the air? No, but you can feel it. You know it's there, but you can't really see it. Sort of thing. So, but when we're thinking about objects being pushed by the air, we're really not seeing it, but we are feeling it, and we are seeing that objects are being pushed, whether very gently or very forcefully. So we're going to be thinking about things in terms of speed lines. So if we've got, let's say we have a box that's completely at a standstill, and we're wanting to move this sink over. Then if we're going to be, moving it with the air, I'm pretty sure if we're drawing it, panel by panel, we would have a character just kind of like, I don't know, this, sorry, do this with their hand, and then it moves very gently. Or, you got that one character that does something completely overpowered, and the box itself would be moving. To give you the idea that uh, air is pushing and it's moving an object from here to there. So that's a really quick idea to think about whenever we're thinking in terms of air, or are we just drawing, smoke or gas? Another way of doing it, kind of give off the idea of air being pushed around, is we're going to be mixing in another element. Most notoriously, it's going to be earth, to give off the idea that debris and rubble is moving at the same time. Let's see, we've got uh, this is really dumb that the fact I'm having to draw a stick figure, but we're going to do it. So we have stick figure Slim over here, and let's say we want him to, do like a really interesting special move or attack or something, and this is where we start getting into um, this little number, and then we have, debris moving. And it's just to give off the idea that there's something there. The thought process is it's supposedly air or wind moving, but it's a little bit more noticeable. It's not really so much speed lines being forced with something that you can't see. It's to give off a bit more visibility. So that is one way of doing it. And but what if we're trying to draw more of kind of a gas sort of thing? Well, that's when we start dealing with a couple different ways that we can do it. So, like what we were talking before, fire in terms of the smoke pillowing, sort of thing. We can draw smoke and gas. Kind of give you of something is flying this way, and let's say it's a rocket. Why not? Or actually, make it more kind of like a fighter jet sort of thing. So, so we got this little number going on right here. And just decide to blast off going that way. So that can give you an idea of how to draw that. And, like I was talking about before, when we were talking fire, drawing smoke and gas is just a lot of, curvy lines going here and there. So I know a lot of people will draw clouds. And you know what? Sometimes still do. But the older I got, the more I realized that I can't always leave it that way or get away with it. So I have to make smoke and gas interesting. So let's say this is just a random, gas cloud or something like that. Then what we would do is take this and start adding to it. Which looks really, really strange. But it's to kind of give off a really fake way of doing dimension. And slightly gimped up that last part. There we go. So it almost kind of looks like a weird cabbage sort of thing. But then when you start adding in uh, little hatchings of this kind of degree into it, it's when you start adding, more depth into it. And another way of doing it without it looking like a weird cabbage cloud is doing this number. So that can definitely give you an idea of, different ways you can try to draw that. And, like I said, the moment that you start thinking of it as cabbage, it kind of, my cabbages, um, kind of gives you this thought process that just won't ever leave your mind when you start doing it. But uh, thinking of pilling smoke clouds and stuff like that, like I talked about it with the fire part, is you've got it's always this kind of number. Lines are squiggling here and there, but it gives you kind of the idea, which also leads into, say, like a mushroom cloud. First, we're talking about cabbage gas. Now we're talking about mushroom clouds. Okay, so and of course the underside of it would have some depth to the explosion. And you're probably thinking, why would I ever want to draw something like this? Well, you might end up in a scenario where you're wanting to draw the Manhattan Project, or uh, World War II, uh, or it could just be like a total gag thing that you would see in like Looney Tunes. Plenty of classic Looney Tunes stuff where you had you know explosions and stuff like that going off. So I mean, there's multiple different reasons why you would be drawing something like this. Um, it really just depends on the context. If you're the kind of person that draws this sort of stuff out of kicks and giggles, I might advise that you might need to talk to someone. Um, but yeah. So again, another idea in terms of smoke, gas, air being used. So now the guys have a bit of a more understanding of various different ways that you can draw the elements. uh, I would say challenge yourself. Pick a day out of the week and you say that I'm pretty comfortable with drawing water, but I'm not comfortable with drawing earth. And so spend some time drawing earth, rubble, debris, floating islands even be a perfect example. And then the next day draw something that you are familiar with, like fire, or whichever one that you are the most comfortable in drawing. And again, also challenging yourself with the most comfortable way of doing it. Challenge yourself to draw various different types of that one element. So, a lot of different things for you to choose from, a lot of different ideas to get your brain turning in terms of thinking about trying to draw these different elements and using them, whether it's in your, you know, your doodles, things that you like sketching in your sketchbook, panels for whatever comic that you're trying to do. Lots of different ideas you could possibly use to work with to get your brain gearing. So that is going to be the end of today. Quick housekeeping at the very end. Haven Comics is actually located at 1871 Slaughter Road in Madison, Alabama, which is where I'm currently sitting at right now. If you happen to like this show or any other stuff that we put out, please remember to like and subscribe. And if you want to follow me on social media, you can find me through Linktree. T Price Artworks is my handle on both Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, if it's still around, and also Patreon as well. And you can always to be really buy me coffee on Venmo, and the handle for that is T Price Artworks as well. One quick thing I wanted to put in: if you haven't been following me on social media and you didn't happen to see my post that I made about last week, I am doing a basically open commissions going on right now. All the information for that is going to be posted. I will be reposting that again tomorrow because that's going to be entering the 10-day mark. So starting today, 11/14. So on 11/25, Black Friday, on 12 noon is going to be the cutoff in terms of if you are wanting to get something as a Christmas present, then you need to sign up and pay for that commission before then, so that I can already have that done and shipped out to you to make it in time, because the holidays are going to be jam-packed with trying to ship things out during that time period. So the sooner you can do it, the earlier I can get it out to you. Everyone wins. Okay, so that being said, thank you all for coming by, sitting down and watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. See ya.